I welcome everybody to our next Body Signals Live. We're very excited to present to you today for our next Body Signals Live. If you didn't get the last one, we presented last week on the plate method, and you can find that actually at the Body Signals podcast. So just go to Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to your podcast, like Spotify, and you can listen to the last episode. But we're excited to present live again on meal timing and meal timing explained. I am very excited to have my co-host, Alyssa Wilson. She is the head of nutrition here at Signos, registered dietitian. Alyssa, welcome back to Body Signals Live, our second in our series of 4.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
It's great to have you. And for those of you who don't know me, I am Bill Tancer. I am the chief data scientist at Signos and also the host of Body Signals. So very excited to present this next topic to you. We're going to present for about 10 to 15 minutes and leave 10 to 15 minutes for your questions and answers. So if you have any questions, just go to Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and you can enter questions there, and we'll be taking those at the end of the webinar.
Thanks, Bill. I'm excited to be talking about meal timing because we typically think it's all about what we eat, but when we're eating, it's just as important as what we're eating. And so when we think about our bodies and these natural circadian rhythms that we have, which are determined by our biological clock that responds to light and darkness in our environment. And our hormones run on these natural circadian rhythms. When we think about our hormones, we can think about cortisol, our stress hormone, ghrelin and leptin, our hunger and fullness hormones, and insulin. These all follow these natural circadian rhythms. And because of this process, what's really interesting is that we are actually more insulin sensitive, and we burn more calories metabolizing food earlier in the day versus later at night. And if you're using Signos, you may actually see a lower glycemic response and a higher satiety, or this greater feeling of fullness, to eating that same meal earlier in the day, whether it's for breakfast or lunch instead of dinner. And when we focus on eating in line with our circadian rhythm, that really helps to improve our overall insulin sensitivity. So in addition to when we're eating, we also recommend incorporating some sort of time-restricted eating or intermittent fasting, which basically just limits eating to a certain time frame during the day. There are several benefits to this. It can include weight loss, improved glucose responses or lower variability or increased glucose stability, better sleep. You may see improved stress reduction and increased longevity. And this actually can also help improve your body's metabolic flexibility, which is the ability to burn both fat and carbs as fuel. So, you may think, okay, what if I'm constantly snacking throughout the day? This is really common. We do see this a lot. And I actually, as a dietitian, used to learn that we need to eat every few hours or so to keep our metabolism up. But this really is not the case, because if we continue to eat, and especially if they're more snacky, more processed food, our glucose goes up, insulin follows. And when insulin levels are higher, it's really harder to get into that fat burning, and we can see higher glucose variability. So whether it's sticking with 3 meals, limiting the snacking throughout the day, or just beginning with a 12-hour overnight fast, these are all great places to start. And what happens is this allows our insulin levels to drop, which really helps with our fat burning. Now, we are always working on, improving and helping our members and supporting their weight loss journeys. And as a part of this, we have actually looked at thousands of members' glucose data. And what we have found is that avoiding glucose spikes late at night is extremely helpful when it comes to losing weight. And so the latest spike time is actually the time when your last spike is detected on any given day. And experiencing that glucose spike at night is highly correlated with weight gain and poor quality sleep. So when we're eating right before bed, that can actually impair our fat metabolism where we're not breaking down these fats as well. And that can lead to, that increased glucose variability, which can make us more insulin resistant the next day. It puts us on what I like to call that blood sugar roller coaster, where you can see cravings and feeling tired and just ultimately making it harder to lose weight. And in our recent study that we did in people living without diabetes, we measured that latest spike time with the CGM, and that was highly correlated with the percentage of total body weight loss at 6 months. So with our research, it really suggests that it is best to just avoid those late night spikes, especially if you're looking to lose weight. The goal is really to stop eating when it's dark outside or at least a few hours before bed.
Thanks, Alyssa. Now, Alyssa, you said some great things there that I just want to highlight. And although we're going to have a whole episode just on experiments, I want to take what Alyssa said and give you some ideas as to how, if you're using Signos, you can use these ideas, things like the overnight fast and time-restricted eating, how you can actually see the results of these within experiments. So, first of all, 12-hour fasting overnight. One of the first things I did when I started using Signos, and I've been using it for over 4 years now, almost 5 years. And I got this both from talking with Alyssa and our nutrition staff, that this would be one of the ways that I could improve my metabolism and lose weight. Try it yourself. It's actually not that big of a deal. At first, when I heard it 12-hour fast, I'm like, that's too long. I don't want to do that. But if I stop eating by 7, 8, and I don't eat again until 7 or 8 in the morning, that's an overnight fast. Of course, you're allowed to have some water there, black coffee, so it's not a like complete fast. You can still hydrate and have that black coffee in the morning. It's actually very easy to do. In terms of experimentation, take a look at your glucose data on a weekly basis using insights within the interface of Signos to see if on the week that you tried to do a 12-night overnight fast for that full week, see how your glucose compares to the previous week, and that'll tell you if that's working or not. From there, you can perhaps go into time-restricted eating. This is something that I do. One of the most common that people try is 16/8. But you can try your own, and that 16/8 is 16 hours of not eating and 8 hours of eating. So for example, if you were to eat from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., stop eating then and don't start again. Of course, again, drinking water, black coffee if you need it in the morning. But if you stop then and see how your metabolism responds, another great way to see what works for you. There's a lot of research out there in time-restricted eating, and I know a lot of us are confused because there's some research that says early windows are better. Some say that late windows are just as good. One of the reasons why we might be seeing conflicting data is those studies they average everyone's results, and it could be your own data might lead you to either a early or a midday or maybe even later fast. And the only way you'll be able to figure that out is by testing it. This is controversial. The next thing I'm going to recommend is an earlier dinner time. I know a lot of you are going to feel older by, stopping your eating or having dinner at 5 p.m. But this is a practice that I've actually incorporated into my own life, and it's made a huge difference in terms of my overnight glucose. And as Alyssa mentioned, things like stable glucose can help with sleep, which of course helps with weight loss. I know that situationally this can be difficult, especially around the weekends when we're out to dinner with friends. So don't think of this as a zero-sum game or black and white thinking that if I'm going to do this or not do this. If you can do this during the week, great. If you can incorporate during the weekend, even better. But at least try it out during the weekdays and see if this makes a difference with your own metabolism. And then my favorite is eating the same meal different times of the day. I know that we put a sandwich here. I'd say oatmeal would be the greatest thing to test, is have that bowl of oatmeal. It sounds weird. Have it first in the morning, but then on the next day, try eating that oatmeal late in the day, maybe even for dinner. I know, sounds strange. But again, this is a really cool experiment to show you how your metabolism actually changes throughout the day especially your ability to metabolize carbohydrates. And just doing this experiment will give you some idea as to how having that heavy carby meal late in the day can really affect your glucose. So for those of you using Signos, and that should be most of you on this live webinar, you can look at some great stats. I know that a lot of you may not be aware of the fact that we've got so much data, so much great insights within Signos. If you just go to the bottom of the screen and click the Insights tab in Signos, you can see things like your glucose variability, your GV. You can see the LST time that Alyssa mentioned on her slide and how you did over the week in terms of your LST. And then you can look at those trends over time. And as you do experiments, you'll probably see, especially the ones on overnight eating and your restricted, time-restricted eating window, you're going to see that your glucose is probably going to improve, which is going to be a great feedback loop for you to continue that particular practice. Another thing I can recommend, and a lot of people don't know this, when you went through Signos, when you first started using us, there were activities that we walked you through. You can actually jump to any activity you'd like. And for activities specifically related to timing your meals, look at activities 38 and 39. The way to find this is go into Signos, go to activities, and it's the specific area that is under train. Click train, and then you'll see 38 and 39. And that will give you a time-restricted eating window activity, as well as one that helps you shift that window around to see what's best for you. So try those things. Again, a lot of great data within Signos. But one of the things that we found most impactful, and as Alyssa mentioned in our most recent study that we published, that timing of that last spike we found really correlated with weight loss. So the earlier you shifted it, the more the people within the study did lose weight. So if that's one of your goals, it's definitely something to try. And with that, I think we're going to try and take some questions from you. So again, if you have questions for us, just go down to that Q&A button at the bottom of Zoom, enter your questions there. We'll try to get to them within the allotted time that we have.
Awesome. Thank you guys both so much. We have some great questions coming in. The first one we have is, what if my schedule does not allow me to eat an early dinner? What should I focus on?
Good question. And, with our research showing like the latest spike, this is really, even if you cannot eat an early dinner, that's totally fine. We do not expect perfection, and we don't expect, we don't expect like an all or nothing when it comes to eating. So if you're eating later at night, really focus on the plate method that we talked about in our first Body Signals Live. And if you missed it, you can go back and watch that. But we're going to focus on putting our plate together with protein, healthy fats, and really focusing on those non-starchy, colorful, fiber-filled vegetables. So we're really hoping to avoid that late night spike.
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, if you didn't get a chance to see the last Body Signals Live where Alyssa presented on this, our nutrition method, the Signos nutrition method, and the balanced plate, definitely watch that, because I found for me, one of the tricks is getting that meal that's balanced, but even more importantly, that is highly satiating. And that helps me. If I can time those meals, I really don't need that much when it comes end of day. And I can have both a meal with smaller portions, but also try and limit those carbohydrates will help you from spiking.
Yeah. And like you mentioned with the insights, like for me personally, my spikes were all happening at night. They were my dinner meal versus my breakfast and lunch. So really focusing on that and trying to, these micro behavioral changes one thing at a time, maybe starting to set up your plate, maybe shifting your dinner a little bit earlier, maybe just taking 5 minutes to walk after dinner if you can't eat earlier. These small changes can really help with your glucose.
Yeah, and I think what you said there is so important. These are micro changes. We're not asking you to just throw out whole macros and not eat them or go on something really restrictive. Just making these small shifts in time, that might be enough to really help you get your metabolism into a better place.
Awesome. Okay, next one. Oh, this is great. How does alcohol impact my dinner at night?
Can I start with this one, Alyssa? Would you mind?
Yep, go for it.
I discovered this one early on in my journey on Signos, and I was making pizzas with my niece, something that we like to do together when she comes to visit. And I had, I think, a glass, maybe a glass and a half of red wine. And I couldn't understand why I was spiking at like 10, 11, 12 o'clock when I ate that pizza at 5. What's happening here is that alcohol can delay the spikes that you're getting in your blood glucose. Um, it can actually cause them to occur much later than they normally would, and this is usually as a result of oxidative priority. So your body metabolizes macros in a certain order. And the first one that it has to metabolize is that alcohol because there's nowhere for the body to actually store alcohol. That can delay the rest of your digestion and metabolism, which can cause that spike to happen much later. I know sometimes on the podcast I say that we encourage day drinking at Signos. I'm kind of kidding, but during the weekend, maybe better idea to have that glass of wine with lunch than it is with dinner, especially if you're going to be having a carby meal. And if you really do want to have some carbs in that dinner, that might be the time to abstain from alcohol or try and pair that glass of wine with some proteins and healthy fats versus carbs.
Okay, great. How do I know if the experiments are working?
Great question. And the first thing that you should do is repeat, 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 because there's a number of confounding variables that happen when you do experiments with Signos. So your metabolism might be different if you are stressed on a particular day, or if you had poor sleep, or if you exercise, maybe very strenuous exercise, can actually throw off some of the things that you see in your glucose graph. So my suggestion to you is that when you do these experiments, repeat them several times until you see consistent results. And I think that's the best way to know if an experiment, if the results you're seeing is something that is valid or maybe is being influenced by other factors.
Perfect. Okay, here's another great question. What if I want to gain weight? Should I do the same meal timing? Thanks.
Yeah. So when it comes to wanting to gain weight, and our members, they all have different goals. Some are trying to build muscle, some are trying to gain weight, some are trying to lose weight, some are trying to optimize performance. So when it comes to gaining weight, we want to make sure that we are still using that plate method, but increasing our calories from still real food. So maybe we need more servings of extra healthy fats, and maybe we need more protein. Maybe we need to add in an extra meal. So when we think about like adding in like a snack or like a mini meal, that's fine too. But we just want to make sure we are working on stabilizing our blood sugar and not adding a meal of highly processed foods. So it is going to be different. And again, tracking over time to see that we are gaining weight consistently and not, just gaining weight by doing so, but eating unhealthy food. So still working on stabilizing your blood sugar, increase those calories, but in a healthy way. And maybe it's adding an extra meal, maybe it's adding extra servings of healthy fats, more protein, so more carbs, prioritizing the carbs, even like around the workouts to help build muscle mass. So there's, again, just adding in those extra calories, maybe several meals, but not doing it the way of processed or, some of those unhealthy foods.
Okay, awesome. Here's another great one. Is time restricted eating okay to be done daily?
Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. So it is okay to be done daily. We recommend just starting off with that 12-hour fast. Like Bill mentioned, it sounds kind of scary and sounds like a long time, but if you stop eating dinner at 7 p.m., then just don't have breakfast until 7 a.m. And you may realize that you're just doing this naturally. I talk to our members and they say, oh, wow, I didn't realize I was already doing that. And so you are doing some type of intermittent fasting. You may be doing that already. So Like Bill mentioned with the experimentation on your eating window, whether it's 8 hours or whether it's 12 hours, that's when you want to experiment and shift to see, like, does it work better for me and my schedule? Am I feeling good on this? If it's earlier versus later. So it's definitely fine to incorporate that daily.
Yeah, I wasn't actually, until I started Signos, I wasn't doing that 12-hour fast. And I didn't realize what damage I was doing. I remember waking up in the middle of the night thinking, I'm hungry. That's the reason I can't sleep, and going down to the kitchen and eating something, just thinking that that was going to allow me to get back to sleep. Of course, it didn't. And I never made that connection. Seems pretty obvious that doing that was going to keep me up. But shifting then to 12 hours and just going back to sleep rather than um, indulging in a middle of the night snack actually helped me out a lot. And also made me focus on making sure I was satiated during those 3 meals so that I wouldn't have those late night or middle of the night hunger pangs that cause me to eat and disrupt my sleep.
Okay, a couple more questions here. What is the single best way to decrease overnight glucose?
Oh, good question. Well, I would say it depends. It depends on what is going on in your lifestyle and like the timing of your meals and what you're doing right before bed. So one way that I think is a great thing to start off with is what we're talking about today, and the timing. Having an earlier dinner, making sure it's balanced with the plate method, making sure that you're not having a large glucose spike before bed. And that way, you won't see that high variability overnight or just higher glucose readings overnight, which we see. I mean, I have had cheesecake. That is my weakness. And so like right before bed, I have a piece of cheesecake and I see my glucose is elevated the whole night. So maybe having that earlier, moving, having it at lunch, like Bill mentioned. But yeah, I think overnight is like really focusing on what we're eating as our last meal before bed. I think that's a really nice and easy way to start with to focus. And then you can start to look in things like stress. Like, what are my stress levels like? That can certainly impact overnight readings. Am I sleeping? Like, am I actually getting quality sleep and going to bed consistently at a good hour? Or am I up all night or going to bed later, only sleeping a few hours, which can impact our glucose readings? So I think like really focusing on what we're eating, our stress, our sleep hygiene, those are 3 good places to start. Bill,
Yeah,
anything that?
yeah, I think we mentioned this the last time. Another thing, there are some natural phenomena that just happen that are completely fine, like dawn phenomenon. For a lot of us, this can start as early as 3 a.m., where our glucose starts to increase. And what's happening is the liver is actually dumping some glycogen stores into the bloodstream to help us wake up and begin the day. It's completely natural phenomenon. So if you're seeing something like that, where your glucose starts to rise in the early morning hours, it may be that. Also, I don't think this has been studied yet, but one thing I've noticed anecdotally is that when I'm doing very strenuous workouts, specifically strength workouts, I can see elevated evening glucose. Um, I just did leg day this morning, and I know that my glucose is going to be a little higher. I think what's happening is the body is actually working on repairing those muscles overnight and might cause a slight increase in glucose. I think the important thing to look out for is when your glucose gets too high. To see some moderate elevation in glucose overnight is probably not that alarming. And look at your data over a period of days or weeks, not just on that specific day, just like experiments, to see if maybe this was just a one-time thing, or if you're seeing it continue to be elevated. Try some of Alyssa's suggestions. If those don't work, then talk to your healthcare provider.
Yeah, I love that because a lot of the times it's easy to just focus on one day or one night. Like when I had the cheesecake, my glucose was elevated overnight. The next morning, I had a higher fasted glucose reading than what I typically have. And it's easy to kind of say, oh my gosh, what's going on? But then taking a look at the overall trends. What are my trends in my glucose data telling me? I can look back and say, okay, I had the cheesecake. But on the nights that most of the nights where I'm not having cheesecake right before bed, then my glucose readings overnight are better. My fasting glucose is much lower. So really looking at those trends, I think, is such an important thing to focus on.
Great, thanks. Okay, couple more. kind of back to that workout question or what you said, Bill, but similar to that, should workouts be within the restricted eating window to maximize performance and recovery?
I'm going to hand that over to Alyssa. That's a great question, but I think Alyssa would be the expert on that.
Yeah, I do think that, it just depends on your workout goals and the types of workouts that you're doing. Some people benefit and they see greater performance, like going first thing in the morning and being fasted and going through their workout. Whereas others, they actually need to be fueling before their workout. So whether it's like a smaller snack, like 30, 45 minutes before, or whether it's a meal, like a few hours beforehand, that may be enough to fuel you through your workout. So it really just depends on the type of workout that you're doing and your goals. But I will say that we are very carb tolerant around the time of our workout. We are replenishing those glycogen stores. And I do think that's a great time to be incorporating these carbs to like maximize performance and replenish those glycogen stores.
And I would encourage our members to check out your glucose graph while you're exercising. It is a fascinating thing to watch. And I found it to be very, very motivating. Like I mentioned, leg day was today. And I see the same thing happening every time I'm lifting heavy, like doing squats and doing deadlifts and things. On leg day is my glucose just drops. And what's probably happening in my particular instance is that I'm exhausting the muscle glycogen, and my body is like taking all of the circulating glucose it can get and putting it into muscle using insulin to get it in there. And you see that massive drop, and then it comes back up as the liver tries to replenish that in the bloodstream. But I don't know, I just find it oddly motivating to see that happen. It's like I see a window into my metabolism during workout, and it almost makes me feel like, okay, hey, I'm like really doing something here to change my body, and it just feels good.
Yeah, you can definitely see the different glucose responses to the different types of workouts.
Yeah.
More
Have you,
the
have you seen that in your own, Alyssa?
Yes. And, I started off, I've been wearing Signos for almost 3 years now. And at the beginning, my workouts were just walking, really. And so when I'm walking, I'm just seeing like more of that steady state or it go down a little bit. But now that I've incorporated strength training, more of the HIIT workouts, sprints on the treadmill and things like that, I've seen the glucose spike. And I'm like, yes, like I'm getting
Yes.
an intense workout in. And our members notice that too when they see like an intense workout and their glucose spike. It can be kind of alarming at first, and they're like, "Oh, do I need to avoid this?" The answer is no. This is not the same. I always say it's not the same type of spike. It's like eating a piece of cake. This is a good spike.
This is a good spike. I'm so glad you mentioned that because we get so many questions about people, and it usually happens when you go like anaerobic, when you're doing a very hard workout. Your body has to fuel itself. So again, it's the liver dumping all those glycogen stores in to help you with your workout. And no, it's not bad. It's just the body's an amazing thing. It knows what you're doing, and it's trying to fuel you up to accomplish this workout that you're doing, and it's not something to be avoided.
Great. Okay, we have a couple more questions. Are glucose levels affected differently during the menstrual cycle? If so, how?
Yes, they are. So you may see that you are more insulin sensitive during the follicular phase versus like the luteal phase, where you can become more insulin resistant. And again, this is where we're focusing on trends. So this may be the time, right before the start of your cycle, where you want to focus on more of those non-starchy vegetables, smaller servings of the real food carbohydrates, whereas like while you're on your cycle and you may be able to tolerate a little bit more. So this is looking at trends. There are hormonal changes, just like we talked about with cortisol and our hunger hormones and these changes just throughout the day. There are monthly changes because our hormones follow these rhythms. So use Signos, see what's working for you. Some people can't notice it, but when you really start to have a lot more data, you can start to really pick up on these trends and experiment and see what's working for you. When Bill and I are talking about all these different methods, it's really not a one size fits all approach. And we see this time and time again. So collect the data, see what's working for you, experiment, and then go from there.
And I just want to add, this shameless promotion, but Alyssa and I have done some podcast episodes on this topic. So if you go and you search the Body Signals podcast for, I think, PCOS, you'll find that in that episode we do discuss how your glucose can shift during different phases of the menstrual cycle. So definitely check that out, because there's a lot to it. It's really kind of interesting as to, again, how amazing the body is and how it compensates for different things that are going on.
And in line with that, we have a similar question. Glucose spikes during menopause. Do we process carbs differently?
Well, as we age, we may become less insulin sensitive, so can become more insulin resistant. So I would just say that we may not, and you may notice that you may not tolerate the same meal that you used to and be able to like not see that response. So again, this is where you want to capture the data first, see how you're responding, find what's working for you and what's not. If you are more insulin resistant, there's all these tools that we're talking about can help improve insulin sensitivity, and experiment, because you may actually be cutting something out that you can actually tolerate. So this is where we want to focus on those balanced meals. Building muscle mass is going to be very important as well. So again, experiment, have the insight into your own personal data first to see what's working and what's not.
I love that you said building muscle mass, because muscle, I was having a conversation with my own physician about this, but building muscle, it's like a giant sugar sink. It's a place for your body to store sugar. So as we age, it's a great idea to continue to work on adding muscle, because you're going to find that just that added muscle mass is going to help with overall glucose levels, as your body needs to shuttle more of the circulating glucose into your muscles. To keep them the glycogen level in the muscles at appropriate level.
And I've noticed that with myself. Like I mentioned, I was only walking and not focusing on strength training or building muscle mass. Since working on strength training and incorporating that and improving and building more muscle, I actually can tolerate a lot of things that I was not previously able to tolerate. And so like I have like a bigger glucose storage, like you mentioned. So I think building muscle mass is very, very important for so many reasons, but just to help stabilize our glucose is just one of them.
All right, we have just a couple more questions. I know that the method has been created to give us the best results. I can't get to train because I'm just on activity 25. How many activities are there in the app?
I believe, Alyssa, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we have 50 activities, but we do have the ability for you to skip activities and go forward. So you should be able to just go to your activities tab on the bottom and click on train and be able to get there. If not, you can skip to get there. But we do have some great activities there that really walk you through all the different ways you can use this data to improve your metabolic health.
Yeah, I think the activities, we call them activities, but I like to just think of them as fun experiments to see what works for you on topics of not just nutrition, but stress management, exercise and movement and sleep. And you can go through them at your own pace. Like Bill said, you can skip them. If you are injured and you can't exercise, just go ahead and skip and go to the next one. But it starts at one activity at a time, and then you go to the next one. So if you're only at 25, then you can go ahead and skip from the activity that you're currently on.
I'm curious, Alyssa, what's your favorite activity?
Oh my gosh. I kind of think of like the simple ones to me are like the ones where I don't have to do like a huge change, but like I think about just like eating slower. I know this sounds so simple, but like for me, am in meetings and I'm working from home, and it's like great that I'm here right by my kitchen. But when am I sitting down at the kitchen table and actually eating a meal within like 30, taking my time in 30 minutes? Like I am scarfing down my meals, like I'm standing up in meetings, and it's just, taking that time and just chewing slowly and eating slowly, like that has helped me to kind of just set the tone for that meal. Sometimes I'll like when I'm talking to our members, I'll say, just take that first bite. And I had to remind myself to do this and just chew it really, really slow, just to get your mind in like your headspace into saying, I'm going to sit down and be in that rest and digest mode and just enjoy this meal. So I think some of the simple ones like that, just they really help throughout the day, and then give you that reminder to, all right, I'm going to, eat slowly. I may not see as big of a glucose spike. I may not have all the indigestion that I may typically have if I'm eating very quickly. So I kind of like that one. What about
That's
you?
a that's a great one. My mom actually, I was showing it to her because she always complained that I eat too fast.
Yeah.
I'd always be the first one done at a restaurant.
Yeah.
And she used to tell me to take your utensils and put them down in between every bite.
Yes.
Chew
Yep.
your food, swallow it completely, and then pick up your utensils. And then, combine with that, I found that I really enjoy my meals a lot more because
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm slowing down to savor the food. And so many of us, especially in today's society, when it's just like go, 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 and we've got all these Zoom meetings, it's so easy to just scarf something down and get through a meal. And I think one of my big shifts using Signos has been with that activity, slowing down and really being mindful about eating. That's a great one. I would say my favorite is the guess your glucose game. So those of you who haven't been there or gotten to this activity yet, it's awesome. It will block out your screen and ask you to guess what your glucose is, and you put in the number. You can actually get to it and put it on your home screen, I believe, by going to a portion of the app which is called Practices, and in Practices you can actually guess your glucose on your screen. But what I love about this activity is it helps build your glucose intuition. So you start really thinking about what does 140, 150 feel like? What does 80 feel like? And you find over time, if you play this game, you're going to get better and better at guessing what your glucose is, which really opens up this mind-body connection for a lot of our members, which I think goes a long way to us just naturally starting to eat better, to think about our metabolism and think about all the things that we're talking about here today.
Yeah, I can tell, like, even if it's between a sensor change and if I'm not wearing one and if I eat something, I can specifically tell what is going on, kind of where my glucose is just based on my symptoms. And it's what we found our members, it's different for everybody, like their symptoms from like spiking or dropping after the spike. We all have different symptoms. Some are irritability or anxiety, some are fatigue, cravings, headaches. It really just depends on the person. So I think that's such a good one to just make those connections and how we're feeling in comparison to our glucose levels.
Absolutely.
All right. I think we have time for like one or two more questions. Here is another great one. Is it normal for glucose levels to fluctuate during sleep? Even 6 hours after dinner, my levels fluctuate between 70 to 110. It's not steady like it is during the day between meals.
Yeah, I could say that, our glucose, we don't expect to be like a completely flat line. Our glucose levels, they can fluctuate throughout the day and overnight. It's great that you're eating, 3 hours or a few hours before bedtime, but this may be a time to focus on like, okay, my sleep hygiene, my stress management. Sometimes I've seen like with higher stress, you can see like spikes at night. So it may be time to kind of like focus on like calming the mind and the body down right before bed to get like good quality sleep and being consistent and just really working on stress management and sleep hygiene. But it can be normal. Like when we're seeing spikes, especially like someone has alcohol or a spike from a late dinner, like we typically see you can see a much bigger spike than that. Bill, anything to add to that?
The one thing I would add, if you're seeing this, it seems abnormal. It could be due to sensor pressure, like especially if you're a side sleeper and you've been placing your Signos on your arm. One thing to try is maybe do a placement of your sensor on your abdomen to see if that changes your overnight readings. Because it hasn't happened to me, but I've heard of others that when they sleep on a side and their arm is getting a lot of pressure, it might actually be pushing that filament into an area where it's not getting an accurate reading. So just something to check. probably isn't the case, but if you see that, it doesn't seem to make sense. Maybe do an abdomen placement for one of your sensors and see if it changes.
Great. Okay. I think we have time for one last question. What are your thoughts on taking berberine with meals to decrease glucose?
This is where I'm going to plug in another Body Signals podcast that we discussed this in detail. So I think we talked about berberine and like cinnamon and some other apple cider vinegar and some other glucose hacks or supplements that you can take. But berberine is widely studied. It's a widely studied supplement that can help improve your glucose readings and the response after a meal. I will just say that there's a lot more of these supplements on the market these days, and that they are not all created equally. So I just would say that make sure, like if you are taking a berberine supplement, like looking at a good quality one, like a third-party certified one, and ones that I've seen ones that have even like added sugars and things like that, that would not be a great one. But I think going back to that Body Signals podcast where we discussed that in depth would be really, and maybe we can link that out somehow to our listeners. But that is a widely studied supplement that could be a good tool to use for glucose management.
I've actually studied it myself, and that is a great episode. I'll try to link to it in the show notes of the podcast. I've noticed with berberine, just my own personal experience, is that it took a while of taking it, like 2 weeks of taking it before I noticed a result. The first time I tried it, I just tried it for a day or two. I didn't see anything happening and just stopped. But when I did it for a few weeks, I actually saw a decrease. And it is with all supplements. And if you are taking other medications, probably a good idea to just mention to your doctor that you're taking this, especially if if you have type 2 diabetes and you're taking other drugs that might affect your blood sugar. Good thing to just let your physician know that you're taking this and get his or her input.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys both so much. For everyone that is attending, as soon as we end this, you will get a survey that pops up. So please fill that out so we can let us know how this went, what you thought, how we can improve for the future ones. We love to hear all of your feedback.
Great. Thanks, everybody. See you for the next one.